How you feeling? You got John Riggs here. I love doing these type of videos showcasing 10 different video games across 10 different consoles. And I usually do the US market, but for the second time, we're doing imports. Now these are games that were not officially released here in the United States, but you might run across them at conventions and of course play them online through other means. This video is sponsored by me and the video games I make and sell. You can check out my link in the description below if you want to grab yours. And also make sure to catch me every 5 weeks in Richland, Washington, Tri-Cities, Reactivate Pro Wrestling. I'm the ring announcer. Come on. I get to wear stuff like this in the ring. If you love pro wrestling, you're going to love Reactivate. It's always better live. Starting this list off with something for the Super Famicom. This game is called Mystery Circle. It's a game that you may have skipped over if you saw the pictures, saw the graphics, saw the box art. Doesn't really explain a whole lot, but let me explain it for you because I think this game's pretty addicting to me anyway. Now it starts off very like Super Nintendo-y. You know what I mean? And then it goes into like a puzzle mode. Like, wait a minute, I was just an airship. I thought I was going to be like shooting things down from space or whatever, and to looking a little bit more like a hybrid of Tetris. Well, kind of. Now with Mystery Circle and your ship, you have to draw around these shapes as they land or when they land. And when you do, it makes them disappear. Now, as the more and more shapes fall down, they might get connected to the other shapes as well. So you have to draw around all of them if you want all of them to disappear. That makes sense? The more you keep playing, the more things come through. You can go through these pieces. It takes you a little bit longer to kind of like nudge your way through. Like if you have to like make your way like underneath something like that, you can, but you just won't fly as fast. And something about this game, it was just a fun twist on a classic puzzle game. This game, Mystery Circle, for the Super Famicom, that's the Japanese Super Nintendo, I was just drawn to immediately. I love games like this. I mean, this game, never mind the graphics and stuff, a game like this, with how this game plays, could have been on the NES. Maybe even the Atari 2600. But we got it on the Super Famicom. It's called Mystery Circle. Might want to check it out. Moving on to the Game Boy Classic in Japan. Now, we just got on the Nintendo Switch online service Mario Picross. I love the Picross series. Mario Picross was how I learned how to play Picross. And in Japan, they had a sequel. They had Picross 2. It doesn't have Mario in the front of it, but it still features Mario. And if you loved Picross, it's going to be more of the same. This one's kind of set up, it looks a little bit more like a museum of sorts. But with Picross, hard to explain in such a short video like this, when I'm just talking about these games really quickly. But using the number method on top and on the side, you can decide which pieces get filled in, which squares get filled in and which ones don't. And when you do, it creates an image. Well, not a super up-close pixel version of an image, but it creates an image all the same. So lots of puzzle ideas in this game. There's also a secondary mode too where it has like much bigger puzzles, and that's when you do like 25% at a time, and then when you do all four, it creates a more detailed image, I suppose. But if you love Picross, I was a huge fan of Mario Picross. I 100%ed it on the Game Boy. Now available on the Nintendo Switch, the Game Boy Online service. And maybe we'll see this second one, the sequel, pop up eventually too. But in the meantime, shouldn't be hard to find. Moving on to the PlayStation 1, I will never stop talking about Bishy Bashi Special 2. It is an insane, came from an arcade game I learned later. I only knew this as a PlayStation 1 game when I was super into PlayStation 1 imports. And I was like, well, I gotta check out this collection full of mini games, basically. Either play by yourself, 3 strikes you're out. You can play with a friend if you'd like, go for the high score on both of you. And just the insanity of the types of mini-games that this involves. And really, a lot of what you have to do is just kind of the 3-button method. My personal favorite one, of course, is the cake-throwing one. It reminds me of like a track and field where you have to throw the javelin, but this one you're throwing a cake at your own wedding. This one, man, the first time I saw this, I was on the floor laughing. Bishy Bashi Special 2, it is a collection of mini-games. I absolutely love it. Again, found out later that there is an arcade version of this too, and I see it at the arcade every once in a while. I think I saw it once at Ground Control, probably like 7 years ago. It's been a long time since I've been to Ground Control in Portland. Now, usually when we think of imports here in the United States of America, we think of all the great games that came out in Japan. But you gotta understand that PAL region games that were exclusive to Europe, well, they're imports also. Great recommendation here. Check out PS2 Minigames.
Hello guys, PS2 Minigames here. There's one PAL exclusive game North America should have got. It's Evil Twin Cyprien Chronicles. I am genuinely stunned this game never left Europe. This is an underrated gem. First of all, the graphics hold up to this day. I'm always a big fan of the spooky graphics design, and they're quite strong considering this game was released in 2001. This is a 23-year-old game, ladies and gentlemen. Secondly, the music also holds up strongly. Very spooky aspect of this game. But it's actually a platformer. No horror-based feels to this game. Very like childlike spooky, if you will. I'm not going to spoil the story because the story is quite phenomenal. You've got to have quite the imagination in this game. And the voice acting is shockingly good. Like, the voice acting is better than it should be for this game, but it is. But also some of the designs of the characters, spooky, but fantastic at the same time. There is one flaw to this game. If I was going to say there's one flaw, it would be the camera. Sometimes the camera can get in the way and not be in the right position. And sometimes will cause you to make mistakes that are not your fault. It's just the camera's not cooperating. But if you can get past that aspect, this game is not only enjoyable, but as stated before, is an underrated classic. And I would recommend this game to anyone. Evil Twin Cyprien Chronicles. This is quite frankly a game you should play once in your life, and a game that holds up. Also, you can get an easy 12 hours of gameplay out of this, if you know what you're doing. And I will not spoil the story for you, but I think it's worth it. Once you get past the camera, hidden gem. Thank you.
Rewind it a little bit and look at his shelves on how many PlayStation 2 games. He's going for a complete set, so best of luck on that one. But make sure you check out his channel, make sure you're subscribed. We got another guest coming up later on in this video, too. All right, let's take you over to the Sega Genesis, or Mega Drive, I suppose. I believe it's called Donna Megami Tanjo? Donna Megami Tanjo? Sounds delicious. This game just looks kind of cool. It looks like a kind of thing like, oh no, the villagers, oh no, the guy's being, you know, something's happening, he's been kidnapped. Oh, don't worry, I am the lady who's going to save the day. Oh, did I forget to tell you that I'm writing this Frankenstein hybrid thing? It does not last forever, unfortunately, but you certainly start the game riding this guy's shoulders here, and I was like, oh, there you go. So it is just another kind of action game. There is some, there's definitely some Golden Axe vibes. Is the game that that's usually the game that people kind of reference this game to. You don't really move it like in a 3D atmosphere, it's just 2D side-scrolling, but there is some Golden Axe atmospheric vibes, but then also not always. I mean, sometimes you're in these levels where you're like platforming, move up and up and up and up. But it's just one of those games for the Sega Genesis. I could have seen them release this here in the United States of America. I wish they did. I think a lot of more people would be talking about it if they did. Well, I mean, obviously they would, because it would have been a game that they played, and not a game that they didn't played. What? Now I'm here to tell you, as much as I love all of these 8-bit, 16-bit games, there doesn't seem to be as many imports for the Genesis as there are the NES and Famicom, the Super Famicom. Genesis, there are several, but just it doesn't seem like there's as many. So nice to see that but there's plenty to keep doing these videos. You know, nice to see a game like this that we didn't get. Moving on to the Game Boy Advance, one of my favorite consoles. This is Elevator Action Old and New. Now, I am a huge old retro gamer, you know me. But this one, when it features a little bit of a twist of like, ooh, it's a new take on an older game. Hey, trust me, what was it, Elevator Action Returns for the Sega Saturn? One of the best games on the Sega Saturn, without a doubt. And then when you have Elevator Action Old and New, well, let's look at old first, just so I can show you a little reference here. If you're not familiar, Elevator Action, old arcade game. It did come out for the NES, though. And there's been other, versions along the way, too, here and there. But I loved this game in the arcade. I loved the fact that you could shoot out the lights. You're just a little spy. You have to go down, go through the red doors, pick up all the spy documents, go all the way down to the first floor to hop in your car and move on to the next stage. Very cool. Elevator Action, one of my favorites. If I see it in the arcade, I'm probably at least playing it once. So nice that they included that with the new. Now, Elevator Action could have just been one or the other. They could have just released the old arcade version, sold that, it would have sold pretty well, and then also the new version, and which would have, maybe sold as well, but they put them both in the same game. Thank you for that, saving money already. Choose your character from the beginning, starts off very similarly. I'm gonna play as this dude right here. And then from there, it is a very much so new, cartoony version. I love the cartoony graphics. Elevator Action Returns for the Sega Saturn, not as cartoony if you played that one. Not at all. But this one brought back those kind of cartoony, cutesy graphics that are just fine for a game like Elevator Action. And in this one, you also have to go through the doors. You can pick up power-ups, you can pick up different weapons, you can also pick up other documents to move on through the stages. And there is also a two-player mode in this as well. If you want to go two-player mode, you can go you versus them and see who can get all the documents quicker or go through the stages faster. What a fun idea. What a great idea. Elevator Action Old and New. Might be worth looking out for. I do love my TurboGrafx 16, and for the PC Engine, this is it Jigoku Meguri, sometimes it's just called Bronze's Adventure or Bronze Adventure. And this is that game, I've seen this game pop up every once in a while. Things like, oh, here's some arcade games that whatever, here's games that look like this, games that have kind of a spooky vibe, a little Halloween type vibe, a game that you might play during Halloween. Definitely has the yokai action going on for like ghosts and monsters and things like that. But again, it's just a very fun, decent platformer for the PC Engine. This is the Japanese TurboGrafx 16, so if you have like an analog duo, it'll play just fine for you if you can find a loose card or something for that. You know, if you're playing the loose games anyway, there's also other ways to play these games. In fact, I think this game was just recently released as one of those like arcade archives digitally. But you know, this is again for the PC Engine, and just a fun game. It's just, you know, it's this kind of game where it's like, you don't need to know Japanese to play it. You can figure it out. Gotta love that. Now that we add on the CD adapter, or maybe you have a Turbo Duo, or the PC Engine Duo as it was, I was a huge fan of that as well. And I was a huge fan of Ranma 1/2, my favorite anime of all time. It's the one that really got me hooked on anime in the mid-90s. They have a few Ranma 1/2 games for the Turbo CD or the PC Engine CD. And are they great? I mean, they're playable. If that makes sense. A little clunky, but a lot of games for the PC Engine CD are also pretty clunky. But man, it was cool to see a Ranma game, because before this, all I had was the Super Nintendo version of Ranma that came out, you know, and I was like, at the time, I was like, I didn't really know who Ranma was. It was a fighting game. I was like, I think, you know, something a little bit more closer to the anime. So this actually goes through some of the episodes, if you will. Like some of the stages are reminiscent of some of the episodes here, including this boss battle here, which I'm not going to do great. But once you get through this, it also gives you the anime cutscenes and the cartoon cutscenes and all that. This is in Japanese, so, you know, keep that in mind. But you don't need to, if you know Ranma, you know what's going on. You're fine. You're fine. There is another Ranma 1/2 game that is a little bit more of like a fighting game here. I'll show you a little bit here. That one's okay too, but I really like the other Ranma game first. As much as I love NES, we've made it this far in the video and I didn't even talk about a Famicom game yet, because I'm not going to talk about a Famicom game yet. This guy is.
Hey there folks, John here for Biddy Kong's Quest, and when John asked me what import game that I wanted to recommend, my mind immediately went to one of my childhood favorites, and that's this one, or rather, this one. It's a Tengen cart, so it's upside down, but this is Fantasy Zone for the NES, and what some of you guys may be wondering, John, why are you recommending a game that was clearly released in the US? I mean, obviously it's an unofficial release, but it was definitely released in the US because this right here, this is a Tengen cart. Everybody kind of knows what these are. Fantasy Zone was one of my absolute favorites growing up, and I didn't know until much later in life, until I was an adult, that this is actually not the only version of this game. That honor goes to this one. This is Fantasy Zone for the Famicom, and it was actually made by Sunsoft, which means that it has a very specific sound to its soundtrack that's very different from the Tengen cart. It's also a lot less glitchy. The colors are a little bit more vibrant. It really just kind of has a little bit of a different feel to it. Now, I will say this one is a bit harder than the Tengen one, at least in my opinion, but I think it's worth it because I feel like the presentation is just so much better. And I feel like a lot of people aren't aware that there are actually two different versions of this game. Now, you know, the emulation scene being what it is, this is very easy to get a hold of and try it out for yourself. And I have to say, this is one of the absolute best versions of Fantasy Zone. So if you haven't checked it out, I highly recommend it. Back to John.
It's funny that we got like the same game, but different versions of the game in the US and then in Japan. I did a whole video on this, good lord, it was probably like 6 or 7 years ago. It's on the card, you can check that out if you want. But you got another game, this is for the Game Boy Color. Daiku no Gensan, which is basically Gen the Carpenter, it's basically Hammer and Harry. This is the Hammer and Harry game for the Game Boy Color. Now they did have a Hammer and Harry game for the Game Boy Classic, for the Famicom, a couple of them on that. And I think they may have had a couple of them on the Game Boy Classic as well. But for Game Boy Color, we have this one, which the graphics are a little bit different, a little bit more cartoony, if you will. I mean, I don't know, maybe not more cartoony, but a different style of graphics for cartoony graphics for a game like this. You have different hammers you can use to your advantage. A lot of it is just you can use your hammer, you can pogo on it. Different hammers might do different things. Sometimes you're whacking the enemies and turning them into bricks, which will also push them against a switch to unlock a door, you know, things like that. So make sure you look out for it for the Game Boy Color. if you will. This is, it's like Gen the Carpenter, Daiku no Gensan, if you're looking at it like on a ROM list, or trying to translate to the box or something like that. I don't know. I think it's a lot of fun though, and again, it's a game that you do not need to know Japanese to play. You will figure it out, kind sir. Now, I've been doing these 10 recommendation videos for quite a while. I have several of them from the US, and I also just did one, I say just, but I did one of other imports as well. So if you're really into imports, you've played all the games that came out in the US, I got one of the import ones and a whole bunch of the US ones. We'll do more videos like this soon as well. Make sure you subscribe. We'll see you soon.